Something this solo run series has been lacking on is videos focused on pre-promoted characters. We did Dazla in the past, but since then I haven't done another pre-promote. So today I aim to fix this by seeing if you can beat Fire Emblem the Sacred Stones using only Saleh. And before we get into the full analysis of the run here, let me lay out the basic set of rules for this series in case you are new here. We have to do this on hard mode. We are not allowed to cheat or use exploits. Only a single healing item can be used per map, and I can use the convoy to grab more weapons, but I can't use the convoy for grabbing more healing items, as I can only use a single one per map. And of course, I can only use Saleh. So that's about it. Let's get in the video. You may think the answer to this question is an easy one, right? Given that he's a pre-promote who usually arrives pretty much as a strong contender right out of the box. He's far from as dominant as his contemporary from FE7, Pent, in that regard, but he's still very much capable of handling himself. However, in the context of a solo run, the answer might not be as clear-cut as to if it's feasible for him to do the solo run. Right out of the gate, it might seem like it'll be easy for Saleh. Start off as a level 1 sage with 2 range on all his attack in a game where enemy res is pretty low, so he should have a pretty good time and match up against most enemy. Considering also that these are his starting stats, he should be doing pretty good. Keep in mind, Saleh has 2 sets of starting stats in this game depending on which route you go, either Eirika or Ephraim. Since he joins later in Ephraim's route, he begins at level 4. But for all these runs, I will always take the lowest starting level for each character. So the stats you are seeing right now are his level 1 stats. And it's looking really good. You start off with 16 magic, 18 skill, 14 speed. We shouldn't have many worries. And just from an overall standpoint, he has some of the best starting bases in the game. So why is this video not titled How Fast Can I Beat FE8 with Saleh? As you may remember, in the Cormag video, I deliberately started the video by telling you guys this would be a walk in the park, despite Cormag having worse bases than Saleh. Well, slightly worse. They're still really good. Well, for Saleh, there's something important to note that makes him quite different than Cormag, and those are his growths, which are just abysmal. There's no way to sugarcoat that. His 50% HP and 30% strength growths aren't the lowest in the game, but each are damn near close to that. His skill growth outside of Tethys, which I don't really count here for combat stats, is the lowest in the game. His 40% in both luck and speed are okay, but nothing amazing. The only place where Saleh is above average are in his defensive stats of resistance and defense, which are pretty good, so he does have that going for him, some kind of survivability. But his spread of growths might be some of the worst in the game, and it's going to be very interesting to see how it works out for us. But given his bases, that kind of makes sense, right? He starts off with high bases, but not a lot of growths, kind of like a lot of pre-promotes do in Fire Emblem usually. But outside of that, it does feel weird to see this sage with this type of growths. And I was honestly kind of shocked when first researching this video because I was not expecting those numbers. I never really tend to use Saleh that much in FE8. He's one of those characters that to me is kind of forgettable. So it did come as a genuine surprise that they look like that. I was expecting like maybe low stats, but like a little bit more than that. So I was surprised. And while it's interesting from a purely academic standpoint, it will make things quite awkward for a solo run. I guess we'll see, and we'll see right now. Let's get in the video. As you may have been seeing in the background, he will simply not struggle on those early maps with bases that are basically better than Seth's. He will make quick work of a good portion of the game, so we won't really dilly-dally as we'll be making very good time early on. Our first real pit stop will be chapter 8 because we have to do a small detour to save Ephraim and crew as they pop up from the left side. And since they can't fight, I have to make sure the reinforcements don't attack them or don't kill them to not get a game over. But Saleh, as he's done throughout the early stages of this video, makes easy work of it all. And I did mention earlier, I don't tend to use Saleh a lot, but I do enjoy the gray and green color palette from his combat sprite. I must say it does look very good, but I digress. We'll grab the angelic robe on this map. This is why we stop here. And in this run, given his poor growths, I think grabbing all stat boosters or as many as we can will be more than useful for us. So we'll want to keep in mind the stat boosters because I think they'll come in handy. But that will be all for the first section of the game, and you might realize that the early parts of this video will keep going by very fast, kind of like how the Dazla run went. But we'll move on to the route split and go to chapter 9. which once again will be a little bit of the same. We will grab the Speedwing from Emilia before she perishes. We will, however, miss the House of the Dragon Shield. Despite starting with 6th move from being already promoted, we simply can't get to the house quickly enough. To the full credit of the enemies, they managed to get Saleh and his decent defense down to 16 HP, so I gotta applaud them for that. But at the end, it will not be enough because we will kill Binks and finish this map off. So far, things are going really good. And as the maps continue, we'll keep grabbing items. For example, Chapter 10 will provide us with Tethys' goddess icon, and Chapter 11 will be where we get an extra secret book from the chest. And on Chapter 12, it will be Ewan's energy ring. So all great items that Saleh will enjoy having. But as some of those mid-game maps play in the background, let me cover a few important things about Saleh. His class being a sage makes him be able to use 2 types of magic, anima and light, which gives him pretty good mastery over the magic weapon triangle, but also gives him 2 options for the type of magic to S rank, meaning 2 different tomes to talk about. When it comes to the debate between Ivaldi, the S rank light tome, and Excalibur, the S rank anima tome, I think my loot video exemplifies the functional differences between both tomes pretty well. But while the choice of Excalibur might seem cut and dry for Saleh, it's actually a bit more complicated than it was for loot, because Saleh, unlike his mage counterpart, has 8 constitution, which is half decent, so both tomes won't slow him down as much, especially considering the body ring we'll get later on Chapter 15, which will make his con of 10. So Ivaldi would give 0 speed penalty and Excalibur would be 3 less speed, which is much less egregious than it was for the loot run. However, while Ivaldi is a better option for Saleh than it was for loot, it's still a worse option than Excalibur overall for a couple of reasons. First off, its damage and crit chance are both lower than Excalibur, so it loses out in the raw stat department. But more importantly, while Ivaldi is still lighter, Excalibur still helps out Saleh more since the passive of Excalibur is +5 speed. So even with the tome weighing him down, it still manages to give at least +2 speed. While +5 defense will be pretty good for Saleh, I don't think it will end up mattering as much as speed, because as we've seen in these previous videos, speed is kind of the king for these runs to double the Demon King at the end. The final reason is more of a logistics reason. Saleh starts out with A rank in Anima with 2 Anima tomes and B rank in Light Magic with 0 Light tomes. So while it isn't impossible to finagle the amount of enemies to fight early on to avoid S ranking Anima accidentally, it is something you have to actively think about, and it can waste time to even attempt or be actively thinking about as you're going through the early maps. So all this to say, we'll be using Excalibur as our legendary weapon. And I'll be honest, it wasn't even a conscious thought at first. By the time I even thought about it, the decision was made for me because I had S ranked Anima by accident. So you may have seen me rely heavily on both Shine and Thunder as my base magic, and that's because Saleh's decent constitution. It makes him be able to use the higher crit rate of Thunder pretty effectively without any speed loss, which is nice to have here. It does make a lot of the mid-game chapters pretty easy to handle, but I do want to take a minute to take a look at how Saleh looks here at the midway point of the game. I don't tend to show stats before level 20 in these videos often, but I think this level 14 Saleh is very interesting for us to look at here because his stats are weird. While his magic growth is pretty bad, I was honestly expecting more than 2 points in 13 levels total. It was a pretty big disappointment there. But something else that surprised me is the 27 skill, which would technically be 4 lower thanks to 2 skill book, but still with a 25% skill growth, that's relatively impressive. Not that high skill is a major stat for these runs, but it's still nice to have. But yeah, I want to show this to drive the point home that while this run seems like a walk in the park, things are bound to get tougher because the growths in 13 levels have been pretty bad generally speaking. And that is not just this Saleh, because while generally some of our stats are on the low side by a couple of points, most of this is just an average looking Saleh. That's why on chapter 14 we picked up the energy ring, because the magic stat needed it. And now that Carlisle is dead, I think it's time to explore the infamous chapter 15 and see how it goes. Chapter 15 won't be too much of an issue. We'll have the advantage of being a magic class who gets slowed down less by the desert, so we'll be able to move through a little bit better than any other class. On this map, the only items that will be useful are the boots, which will be obtained very quickly, but not as quickly as it'll take for Noel to perish. It took him 2 turns. Bye-bye, Null. Bye-bye. And the second item we'll grab is the body ring for previously mentioned reasons. Another item I could have considered is the Metastome to help his bad growth, but it's not really worth the detour since arriving on chapter 15, I am level 19. So it's not really useful for 1 level up. And I do have to make sure Ephraim gets saved on the left side of the map if we don't want him to end up like Null. So RIP Null once again. By the way, if you're like me and love seeing Null in this state, you know, the dead one, well, did you know that you can actually wear it on a shirt everywhere to make your days better? Because yes, I put Null being dead on merch. So if you want some of those, check out my merch shop in the link in the description below and get yourself an RIP Null shirt or a hoodie. Shameless plug aside, the rest of the map is pretty simple. Well, that's until we get to Valter. First off, I'd like to point out we're not even doubling him, which is a little concerning. We take it slow here and heal before letting him attack us on enemy phase, because we're a little low on HP and he has 42% chance to hit, and he does hit us, so that was kind of the right call. It's now our turn, and I can survive 2 of his attacks, so I attack him, and I hit, of course, and on the enemy phase, I should be... I forgot about Pierce. So he pierced me into non-existence. For those who aren't aware, the Wyvern Knight class has a skill called Pierce, which basically ignores your defense. And it turns out I didn't have enough HP to survive a pure Valter hit. So the most annoying things happen, and I have to play through chapter 15 again, which is the worst. But that means seeing Null die another time. Yay! Bye Null part 2. Don't forget to get the merch. But this time, we don't get pierced by Valter and finish him off before we can move on to chapter 16. And on this chapter, we'll take time to talk about Saleh hitting level 20, as he does so during the previous map. And how does he look? Well, these stats aren't awful, but let's pull up his averages and you'll see why I'm less than enthused about those stats. His speed and magic specifically. First off, 22 for magic seems about average at first glance, but we did give Saleh 2 energy rings. So in reality, he's at 18. So almost 4 points below average. And his speed is about as bad, the average being 21.6, so rounded up to 22. Here we have 20 speed, and keep in mind we have had a speed wing, so naturally he was at also 18. Which means in 20 levels, Saleh hit speed 4 times and magic 2 times. Those are bonkers bad gross. It's simply abysmal. His res is technically a little bit low, but nothing major. However, he's doing well above average in both luck and skill, those being his 2 saving graces, but it's not boding well for us and the final map. But we'll get to that in a minute. But for now, all we have to deal with is getting the talisman to boost our res, and also making sure we rush down the Purge Tome Sage to get that extra tool for the final map, as it might find itself useful. But I'll get to that more specifically later in the video. Now, to finish off Orson with a nice crit, to reunite him with his dear wife. Moving on to chapter 17, it'll go pretty quickly as we rush down Leo, and despite our low magic and high resistance, we can still hit for 10 damage on him with Divine. So while it is a slower burn, we get a lucky crit to accelerate the process before getting on with chapter 18, which is usually a big issue. But here for Saleh in general, this will be relatively easy with good resistance and access to light magic. It allows him to easily beat the Gorgons. The one issue being that they have pretty decent resistance, making it that things will be longer to kill generally. Like the boss with Divine takes up to 5 hits, and that's crazy, making me consider the final map a little bit more right now. I'm scared. I'm scared of the damage we'll do to Leon. It's gonna be interesting. But other than the enemies being generally slow kills, the map will be relatively easy, and we'll brush through moving on to chapter 19, where as per usual, we rush down Reeve because his death means that that map ends early and gives us a powerful aura tome that we'll like to use probably also on the final map. Reeve will also once again take a few rounds due to his good resistance. Can you start seeing a pattern in the video? Am I laying it on thick enough? But we'll get to chapter 20 without breaking a sweat regardless. So chapter 20 is, as per usual, kind of more of a slog than anything else. The rush of enemies making it hard to navigate, but here you'll see me switch my loadout to mostly using Hellfire, as Saleh will need all the help he can get in terms of damage to make up for his, bad damage. And with 10 con, it won't slow him down, so the powerful tome will be a good option here. Something else that is concerning is Saleh's low health pool. And don't get me wrong, it's not bad. He didn't get bad growth. It's technically on the average, considering the angelic robe that he got, which just means that Saleh's health is hot garbage. But it makes fighting Morva a little scary, because he will hit us despite us killing him, for sure thanks to how powerful Excalibur is, but it leaves us a little vulnerable with only a little bit of HP, and now we gotta hope to dodge. Luckily, most of the enemies are Evil Eyes, and Saleh's good resistance doesn't care much about them and their low damage, so we survive and can seize and can move on to the final chapter, where we can get an extra angelic robe and help boost our HP a little bit. And hopefully Saleh can finish this run off and prove doubters like me wrong, but if the clue clues haven't been obvious enough, there is a couple of major issues that have been identified even through the easiness so far. And let's find out what they are and if they actually come into play in this final map. So the first step here will be pretty simple. Kill all the skeleton and then grab the angelic robe. All this from the right side chest. We switch to light magic to make sure the Gorgon doesn't turn us to stone, because that would make me sad. After using the angelic robe, we enemy phase the zombie dragon to let him come to us, and right there, that is my first mistake. Saleh can survive one hit and one round to zombie dragon no matter his stat spread, so letting him come to us increases our chance of getting hit, since there is a pretty good chance we can crit him on the first hit and avoid getting hit at all, and then in turn using an elixir. So normally you should attack him and not let him come to you. This will lead to our first death of the run, as I don't heal before running in, because my thought is that Saleh should dodge most of the attacks and can tank at least one if need be, so that way I can push back my use of that elixir, but I expected too much and should have just healed early on. So that one's on me. I won't blame Saleh for that one. That's on me. Let's get to the next attempt, shall we? It should go better. On my second attempt, I opt to go through the left side since Saleh has great res and light magic, meaning the enemy reinforcements of Evil Eyes should theoretically be easier to handle than the gargoyles that spawn on the left when you go through the right. We easily get a crit on the zombie dragon, and that's really good. It exemplifies my point from earlier. That's why you want to be aggressive on this portion. Next up are the evil doggos, who are the real issues on the left side because they hurt and Saleh can't double them and they have good hit rate, so gotta eat that damage, I guess. So luckily we crit the first one, but they both hit us as the evil eyes are approaching, so we have to use an elixir before fighting the eyes. And you'll see soon enough they're damaged despite using light magic, which by the way I forgot to stock up on, so I'm getting ridiculously low on light magic. But their damage of the evil eyes will still be significant. The hit rate is low enough for me not to be scared though, so I should dodge most of that. Once that is cleared out, you'll see that I make a test with Purge on Leon from a distance. I was thinking if I could do enough damage, he might not be a problem, and well, it's 3 damage a shot, so I guess we can double him with it, so that's positive, but it's only still 3 damage. It's not much, but something to keep in mind for later. We will go back to the few light tomes we have left, since we have to clear out the Gorgons around Leon, who have pretty good damage, so light magic will be a great way to counter them and drop their hit rates a little bit. Although we get hit by one of the shadow shot, which is far from ideal, we do push forward, kill one more long range Gorgon, and then subsequently get hit by the second shadow shot. Yeah, this isn't a great start, but I guess it does clear enough space for us to go and attack Leon now, so that's a positive. Let's see how we handle this. And it's not looking good. Our two options for Leon are the Aura Tome, which does 5 damage and give Leon a hit rate of 77. One caveat, we are down to 5 uses of said tome thanks to our Gorgon friends around us. Or now the second option is Excalibur. Does 9 damage, which is, well, I wrote in my script nice, but I don't think 9 damage on one of the final bosses is what I would describe as nice. So I'll say it's better than 5. But Leon has a hit rate of 93 on us when we do equip that, thanks to the weapon triangle disadvantage here. And yeah, so those are going to be guaranteed hits. And Saleh can't tank 2 of the Leon hits with pure water if he's equipped with Excalibur. That's unfortunate. But either way, we will use Excalibur first, in hopes of getting at least one of those 20% crits right after we use our second elixir and let him enemy phase us. But we don't get that lucky with a dodge or a crit, so our next step will be to back up and use the entirety of our long range Purge. It's only 15 more damage, but it will help chip at Leon's large health pool. And if we could get a crit on any of those, it would be even more helpful. Unfortunately, we don't get a crit because this video game hates me and wants me to suffer. I'll then use my final elixir, which doesn't give us much leeway for the final boss, but sometimes I do like to do scouting attempts where I simply try to get as deep as possible to see how possible this whole thing is, and this is going to be one of those. We're counting this one as a scouting attempt. Let's at least just try to get to the Demon King. After that, we'll pure water and enemy phase in front of Leon, getting very lucky with Excalibur and hitting one of the crits we desperately needed to beat him. Then we finish him off and move on to the Demon King on simply our second attempt. But keep in mind, we have 0 healing item on our side. And here we go. And yep, exactly as I was expecting. This is not looking good. 17 damage is on the lower side of these runs. Generally, we're much higher than that. And we don't even double. The one saving grace is we have a 9% crit with Excalibur, which is generally a rarity against this character since he has high luck. So Excalibur's innate crit chance is coming up huge for us here. But the main issue will be that despite Saleh's good enough defense, he takes 34 damage from Demon King on 54 max HP pool, meaning he can't tank 2 hits. And on top of that, 65 hit is a little higher than I'd like, but it's not undodgeable. So we'll need like a lot of luck, just a boatload of luck on our side to beat him. Suffice to say, our first attempt goes, well, poorly. Poorly would be the word I would use. And Saleh dies after taking out all the reinforcements, but dies nonetheless. So what will be our strategy moving forward now that we've scouted ahead? Let me break it down as you see the next few game over attempts in the background. Well, the first step would be to not die to the zombie dragon, which means arriving at him above 35 HP. So that means not getting hit too much by the early skeletons. And believe me, it happened once. So that might seem like a useless thing to say and an obvious thing to point out, but me from the past wasn't so obvious to me, I guess. We do really want to maximize our elixirs, and not using any of them until Leon would be a plus. But the hit rates in the 30s of the enemies around this portion of the game become really hard to predict. So getting through the first part of the map unhit is what we're looking for, ideally. One thing I will make an adjustment on, instead of going through the left side, I will go back to the right side. The reason here is while I can survive the eye damage better, I need to save up my light magic tomes because they are crucial to cleaning up the Gorgons around Leon. And I want many uses of aura as possible, and the reason is that aura might actually be the play against Leon. While it does less damage, it has the same crit rate as Excalibur and gives me slightly higher dodge chance, which if we get lucky is great. But that's not exactly why we'll be focusing on aura. What I just mentioned is great, but the main point is it's simply because of the weapon triangle advantage. Light over dark magic reduces Leon's damage by a single point. And if we use pure waters in front of Leon at full HP, we can survive 2 rounds of combat against him, which means maximizing our damage and our chances of critting. That might seem almost ridiculous to inch out maybe a couple more damage number, but it is kind of what we have to do here given his amazing res and our terrible damage. So that'll be some marginal help there, but it won't be amazing. At least we can keep using Purge on him for free damage, and sometimes it crits, so that's nice. The next thing I want to touch on is we'll simply need even more luck than all the luck we need that I've just detailed over the past few minutes. So you may have noticed earlier I said that we don't double the Demon King, and that's because Saleh's speed is 22 if you count the extra speed given by Excalibur, and the Demon King on hard mode either has 18 or 19. It's kind of just a coin toss. And to double in Sacred Stones, you need 4 more speed than your opponent. So in this case, in the rare cases that we do make it to the Demon King, we have to hope we get the right stat line of 18 speed to even have a chance at doubling him and winning. I think at this point beating the lottery would be a better option. Oh, and a fun extra fact, Purge does 0 damage to the Demon King, so you're actually better off using it all on Leon. Either way, I guess it's a good thing because you need all the damage given that Saleh barely hurts him. So yeah, there's that. So how does all of this go with all these little adjustments? Overall, still very poorly. As you may have seen on the attempts in the background, I try a lot, and I mean a lot. Over 2.5 hours of footage to be kind of exact. And all of that done on 3 times speed. But the big hurdle is beating Leon, since you ideally need almost 4 crits on him to make this worth it. Because getting to the Demon King with no elixirs simply isn't feasible, and ideally we'd want 2 elixirs going into the Demon King. But in over 2 hours of trying, that never happened once. I only was able to manage to get to him with 1 elixir. And it did get us very far in one run, thanks to a crit we got on the Demon King, putting him in kill range. But unfortunately, we would have needed a dodge there to make things work, and we don't. So that attempt was another good old game over screen. And I'll be honest, I was getting pretty ticked off at seeing the game over screen. It really felt useless to bang my head against a wall, especially given that beating Leon was almost impossible. And then the Demon King would require at least 2 crit and a dodge to take out, which I would say weren't really good odds. So after hours, and I mean literal hours of trying, I came to the conclusion that this Saleh was simply just not good enough. And I did touch on that earlier. This is even close to an average Saleh. This is a below average version of him in my opinion. I will need to reset to give him another chance with better stats. So we did just that. And I won't bore you with the details of the new run. It was extremely underwhelming, giving nothing really happened differently than in the first run. So we'll skip right to the end as more attempts play in the background. How is the new Saleh, you may ask? Well, slightly better. We have much higher magic, now finding itself more or less 1 point above average, given the 2 energy rings. So that should be very helpful. More speed too, assuring us to double the Demon King, meaning we have to hope for a lot less luck. Our res will be higher too, meaning surviving Leon might be slightly more consistent, but our defense is the exact same. Where our stats will look a little worse are skill and luck, both who were a lot higher in the previous run, which will have slightly negative effect on us, but I'm willing to make that trade for the good stats we got any day of the week. So the first thing I want to show off is the damage against Leon, which is a much more consistent, literally doubling it with Aura. And while our crit is 2 points lower, Leon's damage is lower and his hit rate too. Wouldn't you believe it? We get 2 crits despite the lower crits on this attempt, keeping some more elixirs in our bag for the Demon King as we just beat Leon here. And here comes the Demon King. And look, his hit rate and damage are nearly identical, but our damage is much better at 22 with at least guaranteed doubling. So hoping for some crit luck on this new Saleh becomes less obnoxious here. And while this attempt turns into a game over due to a very unfortunate hit by a gargoyle, and you see how long I was on this screen, I was a little out of it. I couldn't believe it. I genuinely thought this was the run, but my luck ran out here. Can't be the luckiest man alive all the time. So we move on to the next one. And they do become a lot more consistent with this Saleh. But even with more consistency, it's still kind of a coin toss whether I make it to the Demon King with 1 or 2 elixir. Saleh just struggles a lot in the late game because his HP pool doesn't allow him to tank so much. And while I thought his 16 defense was enough, clearly you need more than that to tank the Demon King. He's just not great, which makes me wonder if he can even do it, since I try for another hour or so at 3 times speed and we catch a lot of game over screens still. And you'll see my Leon strategy has adapted, given that now, since I have better res and HP, I can use Pure Water while wielding Excalibur to tank 2 hits from Leon. Once again, maximizing the damage, but this time with Excalibur instead of Aura, so more damage, and hoping for some crits here and there. And while I don't get any crits here, to the sheer power of Pure Water, I can outlast Leon thanks to Excalibur, and I get to make it to the Demon King with 2 elixirs, which is a rare sight. So let's see how this attempt goes concretely, shall we? So we move Ephraim out of the way, and now we move up to the Demon King. Excalibur, 22 damage. He's got 61% chance to hit us, so we're going to hit Excalibur. No crit on the first hit. He does hit us on his hit. We don't dodge. We do hit the second one, of course, but still no crit. Half of our HP is gone. Demon King is below 80 health. We move to the left side here, use our Excalibur to kill the dog. The reason we do that is because the dog is like the biggest issue right here in terms of like speed and assured damage, because he's still pretty slow, and taking those out is very much the priority. And you'll see there's a zombie dragon on the map right now, which will make our movement around the Demon King a little bit more precarious, and we'll have to think about it a little bit more. So that part is annoying. You'll see that I switched to light magic during this fight of the reinforcement. The reason is the Gorgon with their stone. I don't want her to hit me with stone and then I die, so switching to light magic while being a little bit less strong, it does allow me to survive that specific unit until she's gone at the very least. As you see here, 16% hit with stone, not great for the enemy. All right, so here we'll finish off the last of the reinforcement, except the zombie dragon. So we're checking his range here just to make sure where we have to place ourselves to avoid triggering them both. Because if they both attack Leon, well, Leon's dead, guys. If he's really dead. And here you'll see me take out an item of the supply that I used in previous run, the Purge Tome. And you see 0 damage here. The reason I kept it was because Leon was a lot more consistent, and I thought that with the extra damage, I could maybe damage the Demon King. I was so wrong. I don't even know why I thought I was right, but I was just wrong. Here I advance, equip Excalibur, and heal up. The first heal is just to attract the Demon King in a position where, while we can't counterattack him, we do dodge him here. The goal was to attract him out of a position where the zombie dragon can't attack us. So here we have to take a chance, unfortunately. We're going to have to attack the Demon King here because he can always 3-range us. So we just have to attack and hope we either dodge or crit or anything while he's out of the range of us getting hit by the zombie dragon. So we got to go for it with Excalibur. We do it. We attack. Hit the first one. Does he hit his hit? And we dodged 2 in a row at 61%. And this is kind of the run. Even if he hits us here, it doesn't matter because we have an elixir. We can fully back out, heal up, and then I think we got the Demon King on lock thanks to 2 dodges. We didn't even get a crit. That's insane. And yep, exactly as written, we attack, and we do actually get a crit on the last hit to finish him off in style. I think Saleh was literally trolling me over here and making fun of me by critting on the last hit there, just kind of goading me after not critting when I wanted him to crit throughout this entire process. I don't know if you guys can even understand how hypey I was to see the following screen after that. I was at my wit's end with Saleh, and I'm happy this is all over. This character was so awkward, an absolute powerhouse throughout the game with barely any hurdles, but performed about as well as Garcia versus the Demon King, which is bad. That's bad. It was very odd, but it's over now, and we have our answer. You can in fact beat Sacred Stone with Saleh. It'll just make you very sad at the end. But his ranking will be very hard to do because his official turn count is 310 turns, and his time is 7 hours and 16 minutes, rounded up to 7 hours 17, which is very good. Second best actually, but his actual performance doesn't reflect that at all. This is probably my least clear or confident ranking to date, because I want to punish him harshly for the reset and the difficulty of the last map specifically. But how much do we value having an easy 95% of the game? Like, he did have some of the easiest chapters before that one tough chapters. Most units do find themselves struggling to some degrees at the end. Saleh was just one of the worst. Chapter 18 can be sometimes a struggle for a lot of them. Saleh had a little bit of a struggle in terms of it was a little slower given you have to 3 hits most enemies, which is barely an issue. The mid game tends to be quite easy for generally every unit, so Saleh is not different than anybody there. And some characters falter throughout the early game, but Saleh was a pre-promote, so he doesn't have that issue really. So he clears most hurdles just very confidently. He just has a hard time clearing the hardest one, the last hurdle, which is the final boss and final map. So how can I confidently place him anywhere on this tier list? For now, I'll place him right above France in the middle tier. And this is probably not going to be his final ranking. I'm just kind of placing him in the middle because he does well, but struggles a lot in one specific area where it matters most. So it's a tough placement. So just middle of the ground seems like the most average place you can put him. But I would be okay with moving him at some point. I think I just have to think about it and maybe hear what you guys have to say about it in the comment sections. And this is what makes the ranking so tough. This list is imperfect and lacks data. It's very crude and vibes based, which I don't mind personally, since this is very far from scientific, since it's based on 1 or 2 runs and each reset has to be placed in context. For example, Loot's 2 resets were from me being dumb, not her stats lacking, so they aren't worth much in terms of reset. But Saleh's reset is literally a skill issue, or well, not skill, it was good, but a power issue in this case, if you will. Either way, I've had suggestions from a few people in the comments on how to make the list better, and I will be looking into them. I don't know if I'll implement anything, but I will be looking into it at the very least. I want you guys to know that I'm always thinking about how to make this list better and more interesting for viewers. But I think what's more important about this list isn't the ranks per se, but the tiers and where the characters end up falling and which tiers they do. I guess I'll have to define those better in another video, maybe make it more clear, and maybe things will shift around when I've cleared up what the tiers mean exactly for me. But I guess that's all for a later date. By the way, thanks for watching the video. I really appreciate that, and the series as a whole. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all my members, but specifically my tier 2 and 3 members. Those being Brawler 456, Forgotten Fox, Equip My Gameplays, Hirame, Case, Iron Wolf, Rogue, Arcadia, No, Storm Eagle, CH, Oliver, Nick, Stylish, Scott, Rounch, and Black Rose. Your support is how I keep the channel running. If you want to support too, check out the join button below. But that's going to be all for me today and this run. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. And if you did, hit that like button smack dab in the face. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.